This is Chris Vogler. I'm the author of The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers, and also Memo from the Story Department, Secrets of Structure and Character. And you're listening to GenreTainment.
Hi everyone, this is GenreTainment. We're your hosts, Marx
and Julie, and what you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song from our web series, Reality on Demand. It was a song composed and performed by our friend Tishon Hardy.
Today on GenreTainment, we speak with Pamela Jaye Smith.
She is a mythologist, author, international consultant and speaker, and award-winning writer, producer, and director with over 30 years' experience in features, television, music videos, commercials, documentaries, corporate, military films, and web series.
I've known Pamela for a few years now, and it was great to finally have her on the show. We talk about her nonfiction books, including Beyond the Hero's Journey, romantic comedies, and Show Me the Love, all kinds of love for all kinds of stories. She shares writing tips, and we discuss all sorts of topics, including the different kinds of love.
Yeah, it was great chatting with her, and we hope that you enjoy this interview with Pamela Jaye Smith.
Hi, Pamela. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
It should be fun.
Yes, so we're happy to finally have you on here. I know since I got to meet you in France, which has been, a few years now, we've been wanting to get you on the podcast. My MFA is made things chaotic, so we have to be able to arrange that. Oh
gosh, you have no idea.
But thank you for being here. And thank you again. Also, just had you talk to a group of my students at KWC, and
oh yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, and your approach to storytelling really clicked with them. I could tell. So thanks again. All right, so every script consultant, developmental editor type person out there, they take a unique approach to how they break down story structure and help writers. And you take a mythic approach,
which is so cool.
Can you talk a little bit more about that approach to story and what caused you to kind of follow that path?
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. Let's see where to start.
Well, you just jumped right into the big question.
Well, we'll do a little background, then I'll speed up to the present. I first got interested in mythology in the 5th grade when our teacher would have us come in after lunch and lay our little heads down on the desk, and she would read to us for about half an hour.
Wasn't that the greatest?
Well, it was fabulous. And what she did was she read from the Iliad and the Odyssey. And in that entire school year, we made our way all the way through the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, these are great stories. How amazing. And I grew up in a small town in Texas, and I recognized a lot of the things that were going on, like rigged beauty contests and people cheating on each other and ruthless ambition. I just thought, oh, this mythology stuff is great. And then in high school, I studied Latin and then continued that through college and took my minor is in Latin, so I got exposed to a lot of the classics and was just always interested in it. And then out here in Los Angeles, I was taking some courses once in the physics of metaphysics and basically group dynamics, and we got into the chakras and archetypes and symbolism and all of this. And at one point, the teacher said, okay, I want all of you to, regardless of your profession, I want you to come up with something you can do with this information that applies in your business. And at the time, I was producing and directing commercials and documentaries and corporate and military films. I thought, well, geez, okay, how can I do this? But it immediately became apparent that all of the best stories have something in them of the mythic tools, of mythic themes, archetypes, and symbols. And those are the stories that last because they have that global touch point for us in what they are about, whether it's stealing fire from heaven or lost love rescued or the wake-up call. And then you've got the archetypes, which, a good story will have well-defined characters that if you look closely, they're aligned on an archetype. And then, of course, symbolism in storytelling, visual storytelling, as well as, of course, prose, is just there. So that's how I put together MythWorks, which then offers to storytellers in any style or genre, how to use mythic themes, archetypes, and symbols to enhance their storytelling. And I was just so tickled that all the pieces came together. As I sometimes say, all those otherwise useless bits of information I'd collected over the years all of a sudden became something I could use.
I believe there's no such thing as useless information. All knowledge is good and nothing's ever wasted.
Yeah, my psychology degree, I was like, oh, I'm never going to use this now, but
yes,
it does help out with characters and other things. So.
And to me.
The notebooks I've collected.
The abnormal psychology alone.
The case study will be out next year.
No, but I've pointed that out to him that, when he went to film school, and whether you're writing characters, you're acting, explain to me how that's not psychology. I mean, it's a part of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one thing I find that a lot of beginning writers do, and, all of us probably did this at the beginning, is most of your characters tend to sound, act, and speak similarly. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest challenges when you first start writing is to make unique characters. And that's where archetypes and psychology can really come into good service for you as a storyteller, to create really unique, distinct characters and really enhance your story. The internal conflict, the conflict between characters, between the characters, the environment, etc. So it's really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
For sure. Yeah, I've gotten pretty heavy into genre and reading different people's takes on story types. Yeah. Like we had a speaker recently at the university that talked about fairy tales and how she uses them to retell her stories. So I was really interested in your book, Beyond the Hero's Journey, because we hear about the hero's journey all the time, but we don't hear too many people offer alternatives. Can you tell us a little bit about that book, and maybe give us a little example of one of those mythic themes that's not a traditional hero's journey?
Oh, sure. And first of all, I always like to say that Joseph Campbell did an amazing job of popularizing mythology. Mm-hmm. And his Hero with 1,000 Faces and all of his other works are just amazing. And anybody interested in story or just, for a good read, go back and dive into those. And Chris Vogler did an amazing job of taking the hero's journey concept and parsing it out, giving us the steps, interpreting it for us, and his book, The Writer's Journey, is really, really good, and I highly recommend everyone have it in their library. However, Joseph Campbell, a couple of years after he put out Hero with 1,000 Faces, saying it was the monomyth, said, you know what, there's other stories too, there's other themes going on here. So it's not that that's the only one, but it's one that people tend to fixate on. Mm-hmm. So when I started doing this, started looking around, and I started coming up with, and I didn't invent these, I'm just pointing them out. There are a number of different themes, and I'll just go through a couple of them here that I often find people are following in their stories, but they may not know it. Another thing that happens when I'm working with clients is they'll say, I keep trying to fit this into the hero's journey, and it just doesn't quite fit. Well, maybe you're not telling a hero's journey mythic theme. Yeah. Let's take a look and see what you're doing. So a couple of the big ones that I think a lot of us would recognize, certainly Lost Love Rescued. And that's from the Orpheus and Eurydice myth, most, let's say, recognizable, where the people are already together, and one of them gets taken away. They die, or they get stolen, or they self-destruct, and the other one has to go rescue them. So the Orpheus and Eurydice myth is a really good template for lovers who become separated. And you've got some examples of that would be like, The English Patient, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah.
What Dreams May Come, absolutely. And A Star is Born, where somebody just falls by the wayside or gets taken away, and then the story is about rescuing the lost love, and it really tugs the heartstrings. So that's that one.
Yeah.
That one really does.
And I like how you break it down too, because you talk about like I don't want to say original myth, but one of the oldest versions of the myth, and then in detail, and then you talk about you break them down in plot points so writers can use that as a guide, kind of guideposts and stuff, symbols and many other things, and examples like you just said.
Yeah, I need to watch more movies.
I find it helps people to grasp the concept of a mythic theme story-wise with those plot points, to think of it like a color palette or a musical key. And if you touch upon, let's say there are 12 plot points in that particular mythic theme, if you touch upon 6 of them, we're still going to get it. Because these things are embedded in our psychology. They're in the collective unconscious, the collective consciousness. So all you have to hit is half a dozen of those plot points in any order you want. And you'll find that people will respond to it. They may not consciously say, oh, this is a stealing fire from heaven story. Like where Prometheus, the Titan, brought fire down to humans because they were cold and shivering and they had nothing to do at night because it got dark. Then he did that, and all heck broke loose for him because you weren't supposed to help. It's sort of like the prime directive. Don't take things from heaven and give them to the humans down on earth. But he did it anyway. And then, poor Prometheus, but this makes a good story point. His punishment was he got chained to the Caucasus Mountains, and every day an eagle would come and peck out his liver.
Yeah.
And then every night it would grow back again, and the next day the eagle would come back again and peck out his liver.
And the liver's a painful way to go.
Yeah, I should think so. Ew. And interesting to note, too, that the liver is, I believe, the organ of anger in Oriental medicine. Yeah. And of course, there's always, martinis and such as that. But in the story, but the point for the storytelling is, if you're doing a stealing fire from heaven, your protagonist is usually of an upper class, something privileged, and they have compassion on those below them. They take something that is being denied to the lower classes and they bring it to them, knowing that they may well be punished for it, but they do it anyway. So there's a real self-sacrifice involved in there, as well as the altruism, and it can make for very, very heartfelt stories. You see a lot of this in the teaching stories where some, teacher goes like Dead Poets Society. Straight Outta Compton is another one where the people are trying to help each other up and out of a situation. So it's a mythic theme that makes for some very inspiring and yet realistic stories where you can get across a message while still entertaining people.
That's very true.
Talking about that, maybe we can talk about what mistakes you can make doing that, because I know earlier in the book you talk about how to maintain originality while retelling a story, but also giving a warning about how not to do that retelling, how you could accidentally lose what makes it special, I guess, in that retelling. And since we got reboots and movies constantly
out the wazoo,
it's probably a good.
It's the technical term.
It's probably a good thing to touch on. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, about maintaining originality instead of just following the cookie cutter formula.
Yeah, not losing. What was special about it whenever you retell, when you reimagine that story too.
I think all anyone wants anymore are cookie cutters, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, you touch upon an interesting point there, Julie. The two elements essential for good stories are familiarity and surprise. And so, that's why you find little kids, oh, read me that story again. I've read it to you 5 times, but I want it again. Or how many times did your kid watch The Little Mermaid, right?
Well, that's how their brains learn, yeah.
Yeah, and we love familiarity, but we're also wired for novelty. So we want a surprise as well. And I think maybe, this is just kind of blue skying on the theory here, but maybe one of the reasons that sequels keep being turned out is we're kind of done with surprises here for a while. We've sort of had enough lately.
That's a good point.
You know?
We're seeking comfort food in our entertainment as well.
Yeah, and I find myself doing it too, guilty pleasures. I'll just watch something that under ordinary circumstances I might not, but I find it comforting. But I think for elegant, entertaining, inspiring, enlightening media, we have to do both. We have to rise above just familiarity. We do need the surprise, and whether that's somebody bringing a contemporary twist to a very old story or rearranging the bits. One of my favorites about this, when I talk about the plot points and also the mythic statements, Apocalypse Now came out in '79, and it's still my favorite film of all time. And then next is Lawrence of Arabia. But Apocalypse Now, because of the way the story was constructed, you kind of start from the back and then move forward. And that's a surprise. We're telling a familiar story with, the wake-up call and the rise through the chakras and, the whole heart of darkness thing. But the way that it was constructed was surprising. And so many, many people found it engaging because of that, I think, in part. So, the point is, don't get stuck in the progression of plot points of whatever theme you're following. Feel free to shuffle them around and do it however you want to. A series of flashbacks, or go linear, but give us your twist on it, or just mix them up. But still, hit those half a dozen plot points in order to have your story resonate with that story that lives up in the ooh sphere of storytelling.
Also, earlier in there, you talk about mythic theme and about how it's important to narrow down that theme, and how some modern stories tend to lose that. They're a mixture of all sorts of stuff going on.
Trying to do too much at once, maybe, is what you're saying?
Maybe. I don't know if you would like to talk a little bit more about that, how important the mythic theme is in that.
Well, explain what it is and why it's important, I guess. This is what he's...
Well, I think, again, it's, let's go to a musical metaphor. And let's say, freeform jazz aside, for the most part, if you're going to have a piece of music that people can tune into and get something from, it needs to be in a certain key, and certainly you can have key progressions, of course. And there is a pacing, there is a style. You have your symphonies and your concertos, and certainly in classical music, more of a structural format there. But you also find it in pop songs, and in rock is different from blues, etc. Well, same thing with your stories, with your themes of your stories. If you've got too many things going on at once, then it's confusing for your audience. And what was that story about? So what I'll often find looking at somebody's story is, and even I do brainstorming sessions also, where they haven't written it yet, but they're thinking of writing, let's say a rom-com or an action-adventure, and they've got this bunch of ideas. And so part of the brainstorming service is to help them refine it down to what's the story you want to tell. And maybe it's the theme of going native, where somebody goes, it's the stranger in a strange land kind of thing. Dances with Wolves, Avatar.
Love those. Dances with Wolves. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Lawrence of Arabia, Avatar is the most recent one. I think that really did a good job of that, where you go into a situation that is totally alien to you, and eventually you become part of it, you become accepted by it. then to remember also, you can have your main mythic theme and then also a subplot theme. And most good stories will do that. There's the plot and there's the subplot. Mm-hmm. And so they're on different themes. And let's say you're doing, maybe it's the search for the Holy Grail, but the subplot is a wake-up call theme, where, like Parsifal, who was out searching for the Holy Grail. And you find this in Indiana Jones, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, the old Gilgamesh story, Excalibur stories, looking for that thing that will save the kingdom, the thing that will save the people. Well, that's the overarching theme, but then along... Story. Yeah, right. That's a good one. That's a good one.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. And then your protagonist can also be doing, let's say, the wake-up call, or maybe it's the search for the soulmate, or some other of the mythic themes. But themes are real important for clarity, to get your audience tuned in to the story they're going to be seeing. Because once again, we're familiar with the themes, even if not consciously. So, for instance, one of my favorites is the beginning of the first Star Wars. No, okay, not episode 1, but the very first one that came out, right?
Episode 4, A New Hope. Yes, as far as in my world, episodes 1, 2, and 3 don't exist. So we just pretend those aren't real.
Oh, wait, we just don't know. That never happened. At first, when you're sitting there in the theater, I started the Chinese theater in Hollywood, and this plane, you don't know how big it is, but this spaceship, comes in from behind you on the right, and it's coming along, and it's going along, and then the theater starts to vibrate, and then coming in behind it is the nose cone of another spaceship, only it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the theater's just roiling with sound. And you realize, this is David and Goliath in space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you get it. You get the theme at the very beginning. It's a, War in Heaven theme also. But, yeah, so telegraphing to your audience what kind of a mood to get in is so helpful. Because, and I'll admit this happened to me a couple of times, I'd see a movie and I'd go, I just kind of didn't get it. And then someone would say, Pamela, it was a comedy. I go, I totally missed that.
Well, there's a lot of...
Your audience doesn't get it, but...
There's a lot of comedies that I don't understand what was supposed to be funny about it. Like, never in my life have I understood a lot of Saturday Night Live humor. I mean, it was good in, like, the late 80s, and then pretty much after that, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a story along those lines that may be apocryphal, but then that in the first Men in Black movie, Tommy Lee Jones did not know it was a comedy, and so he was it straight. Mm-hmm. And of course, it made it work, but it's a good story.
In it. So it worked great.
I know. I kind of don't care if it's true or not. I think that's a good take on it.
It was, yeah. And, it was a funny movie, but he was brilliant in it. So, yeah, that's a great, I hope it's true.
I hope so, too.
Yeah, you're talking about comedies. Let's mention another book of yours. So the romance genre is one that I'm not as well versed in, although Julie's seen many.
I like to watch Hallmark, although I'm not so much in I do watch some of the romance. I'm more into the mysteries, but even the mysteries have romance in them.
Well, we looked at we looked at your book, Romantic Comedies, and first wasn't sure what to expect, but it's a really cool guide to like a large number of rom-com films out there, and I like how you use it. It can be used by writers to study different rom-coms out there, romance stories. But it also could apply it to your real love life in a way, too. So can you tell us a little bit more about that book?
Yes, thank you. I must thank Ken Lee, our publisher, for coming to me and saying, would you write this book about romantic comedies? And I said, Ken, I'm not necessarily a big fan of rom-coms. I mean, I watch a few, but I'm not, like a huge fan. He said, no, I think you can do this. I said, okay, we'll see. So I was so glad he did. And in putting this together, the goal was to put it into categories of different types of love. And so when people were looking for a movie to watch, they could say, well, I don't know. I've been divorced for 3 years. I think maybe I want to start dating again, but I'm just not sure. Well, look at romantic comedies, the movie guidebook, and there's a category for that. So you can look at a couple of films that address that sort of thing. And what I did was, because there's so many rom-coms out there, was to say, if it gets included in this book, it has to embody at least one of these 4 qualities: idealism, joy, passion, or dignity. And it really helped narrow down that huge field of rom-coms. What I discovered in doing the book was there's a lot of really good storytelling within that genre. And there are so many wonderful messages to people about the value of love and friendship and courage to start over, courage to reach out for love, not to be held back by age, either side, young or old, not to be held back by social or cultural barriers, but to reach out for, the idealism, to reach out for love and all that it can bring and the ways that it can enhance the lives of so many people. So I actually really enjoyed it. And along the way, I got to see a lot of good movies.
Yeah. Well, and he teases me a little bit. What we were talking about, how with everything going on now, we all are sort of craving comfort food, but in entertainment, I'm kind of craving comfort food. And I know when I watch a Hallmark movie, I know that I'm not going to, anytime I'm watching, whether it's a romance or one of their mysteries, I don't have to worry about being surprised about a graphic rape or dismemberment. I can just sit back and I know what I'm in for the most part, so I can enjoy the ride. And at the end of the romance, they're going to kiss. At the end is when they kiss. Like they don't kiss until the end. And at the end, they kiss, and that means they get to live happily ever after. Because that's just one of the tropes. At the end, they kiss, and that means everything's good. And the mysteries, they're going to solve it at the end. And yeah, there's a murder, but it's nothing going to be graphic. It's not. So the fact that I know those parameters are there are what draw. It's not repetitive or dull. It just means, okay, this is my safe zone. I know basically what I'm in for, and I can sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yes, absolutely. And within that familiarity of the genre, the surprises come in how you get to that last kiss.
Yeah.
And that's, like you say, it's comfort food. And we all like that, whether we're looking for the action adventure or the romantic comedy or
the westerns. That's the other one I get teased for. I love westerns, old westerns.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So what you're saying is I shouldn't trick you by saying, here, this is a rom-com movie called Saw. It's about a lumberjack guy.
No, you're still in trouble. No, he's still in trouble. I don't know how many years ago this was. I don't know. I don't play video games and I don't watch horror, so I don't know what any of this is. Years ago, he's like, there's this new movie, Resident Evil. Let's go see it. I had no idea it was going to be gross and have a bunch of zombies and crap in it. I mean, as soon as it started, I looked at him and I go, you are so dead.
Oh, dear.
You were paying for this for a long time. I almost walked out and just said, pick me up at the bar at the other end of the parking lot when it's over.
It's this comedy about this lonely landlord and this resident girl named Evil who comes in.
Well, I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be a Hallmark movie called Resident Evil, but you didn't exactly prepare me for it either.
Yeah, I should have rethought that.
Yeah, he's still paying for that one. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, we're talking about love, romance.
Speaking of love, after Resident Evil,
We also checked out your book, Show Me the Love, which turned out to be an excellent guide to different types of love, including many that aren't romantic types.
Right.
You know, even some more could be negative types, like love of death and destruction. You know, and,
like someone who would take their wife to something called Resident Evil.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that book and your approach to it?
Well, yes, thank you. My writing partner, Monty McMillan, and I were talking about the different types of love. I actually forget what we were working on, but there was maybe a line about, oh, I just love this, and say, you know, there's so many different kinds of love. Is there a better word we can find for what this person's saying? And thought, you know, unfortunately in English we use love as just this generic word, whereas, you know, in Greek you've got, 5-7 different types of love, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, agape and eros and patrios and philios and, you know, love of family, love of country, love of the gods, romantic love, erotic love, etc. And thought, well, you know, that could make an interesting book looking at the different types of love. So that started us on the quest to compile these different types of love, and it was quite an interesting process writing the book, particularly just saying, okay, what's the first ones we're going to do? So we've got, you know, the first book has 12 different kinds of love in it. For warrior love, love of animals, or let's say love for animals, love of art, adventure, interspecies love, transformative love, and we were so interested to see how many stories actually had love in them. Sometimes you don't think about it, say, well, it's an action-adventure movie. Yeah, but there's some love in there. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's, you know, the characters who bond before they go and, you know, take on the big challenge. So you've got that kind of warrior bonding. And then the mere fact that they're out there having the adventure, that's love of adventure. Mm-hmm. And if they're doing it to save their family, well, then you've got familial love, etc.
Love in Die Hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You bet.
Great Christmas film, by the way.
Right?
Yeah, it is. It is. I like rewatch that every decade or so.
I only recently saw it, so it's fresh in my mind.
She never watched it. I finally got her to watch it with me like a year.
Well, you still haven't seen All the President's Men, and you promised you'd watch that because it's one of my favorites.
There's a good one. That's you know, love of civil society, love of community.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the most inspirational films I watched when I was young.
Yeah.
But
good one.
I'm curious about, I just started thinking about, you know, we're talking about how in English we just have the one word love. And I wonder if our understanding of just having that one word love in our language, if that sort of kind of reshapes our understanding of love. And I wonder if that's the reason, you know, we only have the one word love. So many people seem to think of love as zero-sum game or competition. You know, it's like people who are insecure, it's like, well, do you love, you know, you love your family more than you love me, or you love them more than you, or you love the dog more than you do that. And it's like, no, there's different loves. I have familial love for my family. I have a parental love for my child. Then I have like a spousal love, which is romance and family and everything sort of wrapped up in one. If just having the one word for love in English almost kind of warps our sense of what love is.
Yeah, I think it does. It both devalues it and keeps us from more deeply and accurately expressing our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you say, oh, I love pistachio ice cream. Well, you're using the same word that you say, I love my family.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, and I get, because I love animals, and animals have been, non-human animals have been as important in my entire life as any humans have been for my whole life. And I've had animals of different species that I consider as much my family, every bit as much my family, and I love them every bit as much as I do human members of my family. And so many people think that means there's something wrong. If you're like that, people are like, there's something wrong with you. So you love animals more than people. I'm like, no, it's the same. It's the same amount, but it's just, you can still, loving animals as much as I do doesn't mean I love humans any less. In fact, I found the more compassion and love I have for non-human animals, the more compassion and love I can muster up for people. But so many people feel like it's a competition. Like, well, if you can love an animal as much as you do, then, and then you hear people all the time saying things like, well, I loved my dog too, but then I got a kid. Then when I had my kid, or we get a puppy as a practice child. And I'm like, oh my God, that is not how it should be. To me, that makes love really fickle. Like, well, I loved this until something newer and bigger came along.
Yeah.
So are you going to love, like, you're not going to love that kid after you have the new one? I mean, but so many people feel like you have to quantify love and you have to, like, put it in order. Like, well, if you love animals that much, then there's something wrong with you because you're supposed to love people more than animals and kids more than this and more than adults, or, and it's just this bizarre zero-sum game people seem to have with the word love. Instead of thinking, the more love there is, then the more love there is, I don't know. It just seems like maybe language might kind of inform our understanding of it.
I think it absolutely does. And, linguistics both reflects and shapes psychology.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think it'd be great if we did come up with some other words for love. And, after we wrote this book, I try to be careful in my own speech and not to say, I love pistachio ice cream, but to say, this is my favorite ice cream.
Yeah. And I found myself, because, now we have 2 cats and a rabbit. And I tell them all the time, and I tell Marx, I'm constantly going, I love you. And the babies, I'm like, Mommy loves you. I take a bite of, like ice cream. I took a bite of ice cream. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this ice cream. And I swear, like, my one cat's just looking at me. She kind of looked at me like, excuse me? I'm like, not like I love you. Mommy loves you more. This is just, I really like the ice cream. Like
you don't taste nearly as good as ice cream.
I find myself like trying to explain it so I don't hurt my cat's feelings,
That's adorable. Oh, now, flipping back over to rom-coms for a moment, notice how in a lot of romantic comedies and in just, movies with romance in them, how often it is difficult for someone to say, I love you to the other person. So we're perfectly willing to toss around, I love NASCAR, I love this, I love the rabbit. But to say I love you to a person,
it's
rated,
scarier, I think. You're putting yourself out
scarier.
there.
Yeah.
And what's changed so much? I've brought this up with Marx, and when we're watching TV and movies, I'm like, we're watching something on TV or a movie, and these people, they're dating for a few months, they're having sex like bunnies in heat, and then they're talking about moving in, but then they're like, oh, we haven't said the L word yet. And I'm like, what? Like, it just, for some reason, it just seems so odd to me, because it's been a long time since I've been single, but I just am watching, I don't know I guess I'm just getting old, but I'm just watching it, and I feel so sad for so many, for people who are in a generation where it's easier for them to get naked with each other physically than it is to just have the courage to get emotionally naked and say, I love you. You know, and it just seems so sad. And I think that's why I maybe gravitate more towards the Hallmark, which I suppose is a bit more, in sex terms, is a more conservative. You know, at the end they kiss. You know, that's how you know everything is okay. Because when I see things now where people are like, we're moving in, but we're not thinking of getting married. We're having sex all the time, but I can't bring myself to say I love you. I just feel so sad.
It is interesting how we compartmentalize ourselves and our lives and our relationships. And, you know, psychologists, well, we happen to have one on the phone here, right?
Yeah.
Could address that too, you know, the vulnerability that saying I love you presumes.
It's
and
almost
that
like
caused
the communication is more frightening than even physical intimacy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and, you know, flipping over to the chakras for a moment, the sacral chakra, the second from the bottom, the root chakra, then the sacral, is where, you know, a lot of erotic connection, literally, happens. And it's different, though, from the higher chakras where can be more connection, more transformative love, and more inclusive love. So, yeah, how do we go about getting a healthy approach to all that? And, you know, there's obviously books and classes and therapists and TED Talks addressing all of these issues, but I think it behooves us to take a look at it and see, you know, where we stand, what kind of stories we want to tell about people who deal with these issues.
Yeah. I feel like something we had touched on before. You know, I almost wonder if in this age of texting and social media, like I've even heard younger people saying they get nervous when their best friend calls them on the phone. They'd rather text because what if they don't know what to say? And I'm like, that is so sad. When I was young and pubescent and then through teenagers, I mean, we'd talk on the phone or in person with our friend for hours, and you never even thought about worrying about what to say. They're your best friend. You can say nothing or say something stupid. Who cares? You know, because I feel like there was a bit more intimacy just even among friends. And now it's people have gotten so, I don't know if that's going to start changing the rom-com, the romantic comedies and romance stories from here on out, that people are more comfortable getting naked and making sex tapes than they are saying I love you. They're more afraid of communication, intimacy, of just a deep conversation with somebody than they are, you know, sharing every intimate aspect of their life online with everybody forever. You know, I wonder if that's going to really change our idea of what a rom-com is. Do you think that's going to have an effect, or has it?
I think it has already to somewhat. Now it was, I forget when this one came out, but Friends with Benefits, that's been over 10 years, but I could almost, you know, just now thinking about this, I could almost see rather a reversion to romance, and that belies then and sort of takes us away from the aversion to romance that we're seeing in a lot of people today. So there may be, you know, just because the pendulum swings in society, such. So there may be a revival of chivalric love.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, and that's, you know.
I think the three of us need to team up and make a radio show called GenreTainment.
GenreTainment.
That's an interesting idea. We should hear more about that sometime.
I like it. That would be fun. Yeah, I kind of wonder what if our new social, because, you know, society has changed a lot in the last many years, and also with technology and with social media. I wonder if our understanding of even something as basic as, we were talking about the hero's journey and things like that, if it's going to start affecting people's ability to connect with these stories, or do you think there's still just always, that's a no-brainer, they're always going to be the, we were talking about the myths and everything, if that's always just going to be timeless? I hope.
I think it is. And in a lot of my work, and with anyone who, looks into mythology or history, you can go back and read love poems from ancient Egypt, and they could have been written today.
Yeah.
And no, I think there are, in spite of the societal manifestations and the cultural dressing that happens in any particular culture, I think the basics of human psychology prevail. And there is a desire for self-expression. There's a desire for connection. There's a desire for belonging. There's a desire for the transformation that romantic love can bring. That chivalric love, that sort of love that, to quote a number of things, makes you want to be what the other person thinks you are.
That's a good way of putting it. And I hope you're right, and you probably are, because we sometimes watch foreign films and things, and it doesn't matter what language or culture or religion. I mean, people in those movies and TV shows that just like here in the West, they're looking for love. They want to fall in love and they want to be happy, And also, we're talking about how I love like old Westerns, but I also love like just old TV shows and classics and things. And there are times I'll go, oh my gosh, and I'll show him something that I just watched or explain. And I'm like, I don't know if it's really reassuring or really sad, but this could have been made today.
Yeah.
I mean, some things don't age well, but, for the most part, it'll be a conversation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this was, 50 years ago or whatever. And this is a conversation that could have been happening today.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And that is, well, one more thing about love, and then I'll say something quickly about the mythic statements. I think what we're all looking for is the light. And that's with a capital L.
Yeah.
And whether it's, the light of truth, the light of connection, that what romantic love promises you is a trip to the light. And sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it's all about getting you to the light. So there's this inherent moth-like tendency, I suppose, in humans that we crave, and it's not our only craving, unfortunately, but we do crave that higher, elevated, idealistic experience of, call it Satori, Nirvana, the connection. One of the quotes I like is, vis-a-vis romantic love, we kiss, the world disappears, and we become the universe.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're all coming towards as we make our way to these supposed different pathways to the light. And then about mythic statements, I think it's really important. Subtext is great, absolutely. But there are 3 times in a story when you need to say exactly what you mean, and that's to state the mythic theme, to give the protagonist their mission statement, and then what is the lesson statement? What did they learn on that journey?
Oh, that is so good.
And you find it in the best stories. It's right there. Marx, Kathy, and I did a presentation, a 2-day workshop for the Danish International Film School some years ago. And we were presenting the mythic statements, and she came up with some wonderful ones from, because Kathy has a background in animation, Disney and Paramount and all. And so she came up with the mythic statements for like Ratatouille and Up and Shrek. So good. Yeah.
That
she
Up is
really,
a tearjerker. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it? It's so adorable. Yeah. It's really good. Really good. So, I think people can keep in mind that sometimes you just need to say what it's all about, say what your theme is, say what the mission is, and say what the lesson is. And those can get really, really strong and inspiring and, sometimes transformative, depending on the message you're trying to get out there.
Very cool. I was going to do this earlier when we got off on such great topics right away. But we're looking at your bio, and you mentioned different things. And one of the things you mentioned is XR projects, and so which is extended reality. And that sounds really, really interesting. But could you tell us a little bit more about what that is and what you've done?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, I find it a fascinating opportunity for really expanding the storytelling technology, and that we do have to craft stories differently when they are in 360 or when it's virtual reality or augmented reality. It's a different kind of storytelling, but story is still important. The projects I've worked on have been as a consultant on the story aspect of it.
So are these like video games? I'm not even sure what we're talking about.
Actually, one was for a museum exhibition. And the founder of the museum, they were making a biography, virtual reality biography of this person and what all he did and what he explored. And so it was coming up with ways to present the concepts and played a little bit with imagery, drew some pictures and said, gee, you might try this, and what if you brought in these symbols, etc. And then consulting on some other stories that are about the matriarchy, the ancient matriarchies in the Eastern Mediterranean, and a little bit on games, but mainly it's been about more dramatic stories. And
so much cooler.
I think that games are fabulous. My experience with games, though, was with Microsoft, their Age of Mythology game. And when it first came out, they hired me to be their spokesperson for it and do a video tour talking about the mythologies that they covered in the game, which was real interesting.
Huh. That's really neat.
It's going to be a technology that will continue to grow. I think we need to keep our eyes on it for a number of reasons. And part of that is what it does to our eyes and our way of seeing reality, and how virtual reality can affect us. I've spent some time in simulators as well. And that whole experience, it's so wonderfully different from reality. And there are, mindfulness programs now that use virtual reality headsets to put you into the meditative mindfulness state. So it's really, it's out there. So do some exploring, and you can find places that do that offer that for mindfulness, mind expansion, etc. It's also a very good way to train people and to give them the experience of being someplace they're not likely to go, whether it's, a village in Afghanistan and, experiencing virtually what happens in a place like that. So it's a great tool. It's going to be very interesting to see how it's used as time goes by and how it actually...
I was just thinking that could be really freeing in a therapeutic sense for anyone who's physically limited, physically disabled. I wonder if we'd be able to use that in a way to get people sort of freed up from being locked into their bodies.
Yeah, that's a really good one, and you've seen some of that in some of the stories that are out there too. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. And once again, also keeping an eye on how it's affecting us neurophysiologically, with the blue lights and the brain stimulus. And Marx, you may have gotten into some of this in your psychology studies. what is the input and how does it affect the way the brain processes information?
Well, and we're so suggestive. We got to be so careful too, because sometimes it might end up having sort of a boomerang effect. Remember, they had to come up with a whole new term for people who became terribly depressed after watching Avatar, because people were so incredibly affected and so depressed when they had to leave the world of Avatar and get back to the real world that people were becoming suicidal. They were so distraught.
I forgot about that.
And there were people. They had to have therapy groups and hotlines and everything.
I did not know that.
Oh, look it up if you can. People, because some people.
Wow.
Yeah, we went and saw it in 3D. It was incredible, and there was a sense of when it was over, it's over, and you're like, gosh, now we're back. It was sort of like, it was kind of like a real life version of Wizard of Oz, where it was black and white, and then it was color, and it was Technicolor, and it was amazing, and everything's, animals and plants are singing and dancing, and then it was, black and white again at the end. But it was real life. We left our dull world and went into that, and I didn't have any negative effect, but I did feel like afterwards, I was like, gosh, if only real life could be like that, that would be so cool. But there were people who were more vulnerable, I suppose, to maybe chemical imbalances and things. And they actually, I can't remember the term, but they had to come up with a specific term for the type of depression and despair that happens to people after especially repeated viewings of Avatar, and then having to come back into the regular world. It was wild.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I can imagine what, this new technology might be like.
Yeah. That reminds me, along that topic, there's the Great Courses. We got Great Courses Plus.
Oh, it's great.
And there's a new course that we haven't watched yet. I just watched the trailer, but it examines how technology might be changing us.
Our brains.
It tackles topics like, does social media actually affect our social or our attention span?
Yes.
It does.
I don't need a scientist.
Relying on Google, like search engines, is that affecting our ability or memory? So,
yes.
That kind of stuff. So.
Sorry.
You haven't watched it yet. You don't know.
I know, but I'm just telling you what I think.
Yeah, and I think we need to be aware of that. We are on the verge of evolution of human consciousness. And a lot of that is because of the technology, the machines. And, now we can get into a whole different, the machine-human melding, and AI, and there's lots of great stories about that.
Oh, you're just describing my nightmares.
Yeah. Seriously, somebody says, "Oh, let's have the Internet of Things, and your refrigerator can talk, and it knows it." Don't you people ever watch the movies? Don't you know how this ends?
Thank you.
Seriously.
Space Odyssey, anyway.
Amen. I was a receptionist at a hair salon up in Vancouver. Marx was in film school, and this guy came in, and he was talking about how he was going to learn how to. He was some yuppie guy. He's learning to work smart, not work hard. And he had this book, and he was like, "This book is another one that explains how you can get your computers and do this, so you only have to work like 4 hours a week." And I said, "I've seen this movie. It doesn't end well. Skynet, And he just looked at me with a blank face, and I'm like, "I'm just telling you, I know how this ends. It never ends well."
Oh, that's great. I have a word for you, Skynet.
Skynet.
Yeah.
When I said Skynet, like one person understood in the whole place and started to chuckle, and I just got blank stare like I was a nutcase.
And that reminds me that there's an article in The Guardian. They used AI to write an article.
Oh, tell her this was creepy.
Yeah. It had to do I think they wrote the first paragraph and they gave it some prompts, but supposed to talk about why humans shouldn't be worried about artificial intelligence killing them. So it was an interesting article how it talked, but it shows how powerful that's getting. So some writers are scared.
But it said something like, "You shouldn't be worried. You shouldn't be afraid of us. You humans just do what you do. You're hating and you're fighting and you're killing, and we'll just be here doing what we do."
Stand back and watching you.
It was something along those lines, and I just was like, You know how they say out of the mouths of babes, out of the mouths of a babe robot.
Boy.
So some writers are scared that might eventually replace them, but most writers
I'm going to be Amish.
Are thinking it might be a cool tool to use, kind of like prompt tools, story structure, to work together, because the editor still has to go through and edit it. And they said that when they edited the column, it was like a lot of it was very clear and good and just had minor errors. Some of it went into total rambling, a garble goo, until it got back on track. So,
but it wrote an article about it, a topic.
Yeah, so it's interesting where artificial intelligence is going.
God. I'm going to thank you both for my nightmares tonight.
Yeah, so we've really gotten some weird some side topics here.
Wow.
Oh, I'm going to have nightmares. Thank you, guys.
All right, so we probably should start wrapping up the interview here, after ending on such a nice topic.
We're all going to die from the robots. Skynet!
No.
It never ends well.
Before we go, though, can you tell us where people, our listeners, can find you online and can find your books?
All your podcasts.
Oh, yes, thank you. They can go to PamelaJayeSmith.com. That's PamelaJayeSmith, PamelaJayeSmith.com. And they can also look at MythWorks, MythWorks, MythWorks.net. It'll take you to the same website. So either MythWorks or Pamela Jaye Smith.
Yeah, I hope everybody checks it out. If Myth or the hero's journey or the writer's journey, like Chris Vogler, appeal to you as a writer, then I guarantee that you're going to love all Pamela Jaye's stuff. It takes
Absolutely. And you just heard Pamela on here. She is a hoot and a half, and you're going to just love everything she has to say.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and you took me into arenas of thought that, okay, well, I have to think some more about that. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mur Lafferty, author of The Shambling Guide to New York City, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk with us, Pamela.
We'll have links on the show notes to help you find her website and books.
And that's it for today's GenreTainment. Watch for our next episode, and until next time. Woohoo! Bad monkey.